So ESPN had their top 74 players of all time. I figure why not talk about it? Just go down the list a little bit. The top 3 is MJ, LeBron, and Kareem. I think everybody expected that to be the top 3. I don't really have any strong opinions on it any which way, so we just move on. Bill Russell at number 4. So the thing with Bill Russell is he won a crap ton of titles. The league that he won those titles in was really stupid. The number of teams was down. The number of playoff rounds was down. His team was obscenely loaded. I mean, between Bob Cousy, Tom Heinsohn, Bill Sharman, who had like some 20-point scoring years, Havlicek, Sam Jones. But at the same time, the Lakers were pretty damn good. I mean, Elgin Baylor and Jerry West is one of the best duos that you're ever going to find. And the fact that Russell Celtics just constantly won was a thing. Of course, they routinely beat Wilt's teams as well. I think we would all agree that if Bill Russell played in a league that just had more talent and was able to have more players, he wouldn't have as many championships. I think that's fair. I think we can also still say he has to be up here somewhere. I think, trying to think of how Bill Russell would be in today's NBA, he was 6'10", very athletic. Is there a chance that he could have been like a switch everything type of center who could also protect the rim and defend the post and stuff? I mean, he has the physical profile for it, certainly. I mean, the guy also had a 7'4" wingspan, so it wouldn't shock me if he could do that, but even then, he wouldn't win however many titles he's got. Of course, he won 8 in a row at one point, so I think we should just remember that, when you start just rattling off the titles for Bill Russell. For the rest of the top 10, Wilt is maybe the toughest guy to rank for me because the inflated numbers argument really applies to him. I mean, they threw him the ball every single possession. He played every single minute. The field goal attempts as well as the points per game of Wilt's era are way higher than any other NBA era. The only somewhat connection is the points per game in, let's say, 1964, which was 111 a game, is the same as it is now. The difference is nowadays we've got three-pointers, so the fact that they didn't kind of just shows you where the league was at. And so it's just kind of tough for me to put Wilt wherever. Also, the stuff about him, like, deciding, okay, I'm gonna lead the league in assists because none of you think I'm a great passer or whatever. So then he would just fish for assists instead of just making whatever the right play was for a particular possession. And so it makes it kind of tough to really categorize Wilt to me. Like, sometimes I think he's the 4th best player ever. Sometimes I think he's around number 10. I don't know. I'm not really giving my own like specific rankings because I don't really see that as the point of this conversation. But not only that, I don't really know what my exact list would be. I mean, if I sat down and did it, I'd come up with something, but I don't know. We're just talking about the all-time players. Anyway, number 7, they had Bird. Number 8 was Tim Duncan. Or Magic was at number 5, by the way. And then they have Kobe and Shaq to close it out. This trio was interesting, and ESPN, they knew what they were doing here, okay? The arguments for Tim Duncan as well as Kobe over Shaq is the longevity. As it is said all the time with Shaq, if we're just taking his absolute peak, then he is potentially the best player ever. But of course, that is not the whole criteria. Although I do think it matters. I mean, personally, I would have Shaq above Kobe. Would I have him above Tim Duncan? I go back and forth on this one in the moment. Like, as of right now, I think I would have him over Duncan, but if you ask me tomorrow, I might have a different opinion there. The one thing that does need to be remembered with Tim Duncan is that he did beat Shaq in a playoff series in the middle of Shaq being amazing. I mean, we talk about the Pistons series all the time, but they lost to the Spurs the year before that. And they also lost to the Spurs in 1999, where Tim Duncan put up 29 and 11, Shaq put up 24 and 13. It was a sweep for San Antonio. Of course, when the Lakers beat the Spurs, they dominated the Spurs and then some. So, you go back and forth. I think one thing that is worth remembering is that Kobe was awesome in that 4-game sweep with the Spurs as well. So, because I think sometimes there's the idea of that it was all Shaq and no Kobe. That's not the case, you know. I feel like we spend so much time talking about how Kobe had Shaq. We don't spend enough time talking about how Shaq had Kobe. Okay, so Hakeem is number 12. The Hakeem versus Kobe conversation, it's an interesting one. I mean, they both have 2 championships as the best players on their teams. Kobe, of course, has another 3. Hakeem went to a finals in his second season. If it wasn't for Ralph Sampson's injury, there's a chance they go to a lot more. I don't know, man. It's an interesting thing. I'm not trying to spend 9 years on Kobe versus Hakeem. I'd rather just move on. Because, again, I'm not trying to create my own list right now. I'm more so just trying to talk about guys. So there was a conversation about Steph Curry versus Kevin Durant. Would I make a video on this? Potentially. I think KD is a better player than Steph. I think the interesting thing is how close these two are to number 10 already, which I think is fair, certainly. And a lot of people don't like either one of these guys. I mean, recently ESPN's been doing, well, maybe just ESPN or whoever, they've been doing like a who would win the 2017 Warriors versus Shaq and Kobe's Lakers, MJ's Bulls or whatever. And the polls are just like so against the Warriors, and it's like really weird to me because, I mean, to me, they would win both of those series for various reasons, even if they don't have the absolute best player. So when these two are really in the conversation for the top 10, it's going to be interesting to see how people deny them those spots when they're really going to deserve to be in that. I mean, if Kevin Durant wins a title in Brooklyn, or maybe, you know, God forbid, anybody who really doesn't want him in the top 10, what if he wins 2 titles in Brooklyn? Good luck making the case, because I'm not going to make it. I will gladly put Kevin Durant in the 10 best players ever list. Same thing with Steph Curry. Should be noted, Karl Malone, the first guy on here without a championship. I found that kind of noteworthy for whatever reason. Like, I guess that's the cutoff, 17th. Not that ESPN is the end-all be-all of rankings, but I do feel like that's kind of accurate just in the general basketball conversation of that sort of thing, you know, titles and where it affects your all-time rank. Anyway, I want to talk about Kevin Garnett because I think KG is perhaps the biggest example ever of being wasted on a team. Part of it was because of the Joe Smith thing where they lost a whole bunch of draft picks. Stephon Marbury didn't want to be his teammate. And KG he never demanded a trade, but he okayed a trade from them like years too late. I mean, you know, the Celtics got him when he was 30-something. Imagine if he was moved when he was like 29, you know what I mean? Just a couple extra years. Or if he just simply doesn't get injured in the second Celtics season. I mean, to me, there's an alternate reality in where Kevin Garnett is a consensus top 10 player ever. 25 points, 13, 14 rebounds, be potentially the best defensive player in the league, being able to switch all 5 positions. Although he would have trouble against defending like Shaq in the post, because KG was not like the biggest guy in the world. You know, 5 assists a game and whatever else, so I think the next interesting thing pops up right after Kevin Garnett, Scottie Pippen over Elgin Baylor. You're talking about one of the best scorers ever versus one of the best all-around but not great scorers ever. Or really, you can go Scottie over Charles Barkley, David Robinson, Kawhi, D-Wade, Giannis, although Giannis will pass everybody here soon. We'll get to Giannis. That's an interesting one. This video is going to be a little longer than normal, by the way. You know, with Pippen, it is an interesting take, putting him above Charles Barkley, Elgin Baylor. It's the idea of the totality of the career and the winning, even if he, of course, was not the best player. That was MJ. Being maybe the best perimeter defender ever. I mean, we'll have to see how Kawhi's second leg of his career goes or whatever. I don't know, man. Like, was Scottie Pippen really better all time than Charles Barkley? I think I would have been okay with Scottie getting knocked down just a couple of spots. I think him and David Robinson's interesting. I think a good spot for Scottie would have been 25th. Maybe 26th because, like, is Kawhi better than Scottie? I don't know. Kawhi's all-time case is very interesting because his all-time numbers rank nowhere, and yet he's got 2 championships. One where he wasn't the best player, one where he definitely was. And we'll have to see how the rest of his career goes. I think putting Scottie over D. Wade. See, but even then, like, Scottie, like, his peak versus D. Wade's peak, that's Dwayne Wade 100%. But Dwayne Wade, his legs fell off after that first year with LeBron. So while I love Scottie Pippen, I do think I would knock him down a bit, probably to the mid-20s or so. I feel like having him over a lot of these guys. Like, is he really better than all these guys? I don't know. Like, you're talking about Kawhi and D. Wade's peaks as scorers and all that. Charles Barkley was routinely... Like, I have to imagine Charles Barkley was often thought of as better than Scottie Pippen while they were both playing, right? So, yeah. Then we get to the point guard conversation. The John Stockton, Allen Iverson, Steve Nash, Isaiah Thomas. So if I was going to rank these 4 guys, I'd go Isaiah Thomas number 1. Should have had 3 championships, ended up with 2, because he had one really bad call against the Lakers. Go against him. His playmaking was awesome. His efficiency is not amazing, but I just think the era he played in and the team he was on just went against everything that his skill set was about. You know, like, to me, his best thing was pick and roll, spread the floor and all that, but it wasn't a thing. And I've been pretty consistent in kind of giving guys a pass, looking back on how basketball has changed and everything. To me, Isaiah was like a better player who was never able to totally show it off, and even when he was able to show off, was still pretty damn great. Number 2, I'm going to go John Stockton. Yeah, I know, Stockton over Iverson or Nash. Like, how could I? Stockton, like, when you're talking about consistency and defense and the stuff that doesn't show up in the box score on top of the stuff that does show up in the box score, I just feel like there's very few guys who bring it to the level that Stockton does. I mean, there's other guys, like Scottie Pippen might be the best example of this, but Stockton to me is really high on that list. As far as Nash versus Iverson, sorry, I'm just not on the Iverson hype train. I'm just not. I feel like his one great finals run has, whereas with Iverson it was more of a question, and the playoff success really wasn't that awesome outside of the 1 year. Like, it's round 2 losses where it's not like they put up a crazy fight, or it's a round 1 loss, or they don't make the playoffs at all, and yeah. Now, the case for him is his team sucked. Yeah, I mean, the supporting casts weren't always awesome. Certainly. Would have been nice to see him with a Stoudemire or a Karl Malone or everything Isaiah had around him. Now, James Harden is right below all those guys at 32. I think he's going to pass all of them pretty fast if he hasn't already. Even if Harden never wins a title, he's going to be, there's going to be a case for him above, like, Dwayne Wade, and I know people don't want to hear that one, but it is true. And maybe some other guys in the mid-20s or so. I never talked about Giannis. So he's 27th. I really don't mind that he's 27th. I feel like this is already kind of fair. Even if ESPN is projecting like a little bit, but so what? Like, do we really need to wait to say that Isaiah Thomas is not as good as Giannis? Like, I don't, like, let's just, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. John Havlicek at 33, fine. George Mikan, there's cases to be made that he was trash once the NBA actually got good. Jason Kidd at 35, he was not efficient, couldn't shoot, everything else was amazing, cool. Chris Paul at 40 is interesting. They, of course, did not put him into the big point guard group that is about 10 or whatever spots ahead it is. I don't know. When you look at CP compared to like Bob Pettit, I don't know if there's a conversation to really be had. That being said, I think he should be higher. But even then, I'm like, is he better than Patrick Ewing? I don't know. It's a tough one right there. Is Allen Iverson better than Patrick Ewing? I don't know. Anyway, we're going to skip to the bottom because there's other things I want to talk about. So Damian Lillard is 72. Also, I'm just going to have a picture of Dame the rest of the way because I'm getting tired of downloading pictures off of Google. The funny thing is, I think if we're comparing just peaks, then Dame is way higher on this list. Because, you know, he's like Tony Parker. If you take Tony and Damian Lillard at their best days, Dame is better than Tony. He's probably better than Bernard King. He's better than Pete Maravich. But Dame is going to have to do it for a few more years, and we're going to have to see how his playoff success goes. Clyde Drexler at 57. I feel like Clyde should be higher. He has had a really, really good all-around game, even if he wasn't like the super scorer or whatever. Like Ray Allen over Clyde Drexler to me is just wrong. Vince Carter on this list at all is a complete joke. I mean, look, I love VC and the first couple years in Toronto, okay, fine. Just no, man. I mean, the fact that Dwight Howard is not on this list at all is really bad. But that he's not here and Vince Carter is, like, that just doesn't make any sense. Tracy McGrady over Paul Pierce. I feel like it's kind of stupid. I mean, I get it. People don't like Paul Pierce, and T-Mac was certainly more exciting. And you could even argue T-Mac was a better regular season player than Paul Pierce. When we're talking about postseason success as well as longevity, I mean, come on. Paul Pierce was better than T-Mac. Was he better than T-Mac when they were at their absolute best? No. But I feel like the other stuff is so in favor of Pierce that he should be over Tracy McGrady. I know that people were upset about Anthony Davis at 45. But when I start to look at the guys below him, like Dominique, George Gervin, Bill Walton, well, Bill Walton, that's an interesting one. There's a case Bill Walton could be higher. I mean, he was healthy for very little of his career, but when he won championships. So if he had a full career, there's a chance he's a top 10 guy of all time. So maybe that would be the case for him over Anthony Davis. But as far as other guys, you know, I mentioned Dominique, Reggie Miller, who I think is underrated, but still. I mean, Wes Unseld, James Worthy. Then we're getting back to the T-Mac thing. Like, who here is better than Anthony Davis? I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't get too hung up about this guy's career hasn't finished. Like, who gives a crap? If he's already better, then just put him there. Now, I know there has been a thing about, Anthony Davis hasn't accomplished much. Listen, go look at the teams that Anthony Davis was playing with in New Orleans. I mean, between bad draft picks and injuries and Eric Gordon not caring and Tyreek Evans and whatever else, like, those teams were jokes, okay? I mean, there was a year where they played Kendrick Perkins, like, real minutes. Now, Gary Payton was in here as well, between Paul Pierce and Tracy McGrady. I feel like Gary Payton's got a case to be higher. Could you stretch him into the 40s or so? Like, is Gary Payton better than Dominique? I don't know. That's an interesting one. It doesn't help that I wasn't watching these guys day in and day out, you know? Like, if there's going to be bias for me, it's the idea of Anthony Davis over Dominique. I'm willing to admit that. Bob Cousy over Westbrook is very funny, and ESPN clearly knew what they were doing with that one. Look, here's the thing. If you had Westbrook and Bob Cousy play one-on-one right now, Westbrook would destroy him, okay? It would be 1,000,000-0. But if you were going to give Bob Cousy the benefits of today and stuff, would he average, I don't know, something, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm done. I feel like the other snub that people were talking about was Adrian Dantley. But if we're being honest, Adrian Dantley kind of sucked. Like, yeah, he would score a lot of points, but it was the stupidest points you ever saw. Like, the dude would just sit at the mid-range for 5 seconds, make some move, not keep the ball moving at all. Defense, passing, all that, nothing to be seen here. He was on a whole bunch of different teams because nobody actually wanted to keep him, although he was on Utah for a while, so if you look at those Utah teams, they were pretty much never good. And I know I said a similar thing with Anthony Davis, but I know AD is an amazing defensive player, and I know that he makes a huge impact on winning. There's very little evidence to suggest Adrian Dantley made his teams better. So anyway, that's it.